Welcome everyone to this week's F3 track guide around Okayama Circuit. It's a twisty track, to say the least, especially the last two sectors. You have to be very easy on that throttle. Throttle control is very important around here, as there's quite a few hairpins, quite a few slow corners that can really ruin your race. So yeah, it's important to watch those throttle inputs and that flying lap this week. As always, we've got the slow drive-through around track, and we've got the flying lap with the overview or the far camera chase angle afterwards. Now, a lot of you guys ask me what setups I'm using, so I generally switch between pure driving school and Craig setup. Now, I have noticed over the past few weeks that I'm preferring the Craig setups. Just suits my driving style a lot more, generally due to the gear ratios. I've noticed there's sometimes some difference in the aero as well, in the downforce used in the pure driving school setup, but I can't remember his name who sets them up. His driving style is just a little bit different to mine. So in particular to the F3 cars, I use the ones from Craig's. But yeah, I'll put a link in the description below. They're $5 a month, so there's not too much difference this week in regards to setups. Just a couple of the gear ratios are a little bit off, so you'll probably be using a slightly, maybe one gear lower in some of the slower corners than you would be with the Craig's setup one. So yeah, that's, if you're using pure driving school setup, you can pretty much use this track guide as well. So, but yeah, I hope you guys enjoy it. I'm nice and early this week, got it at the start of the week, so you guys can get plenty of practice in. Hopefully it takes plenty of time off your lap times. As I do state in the drive-through, there's a couple of corners at the end, or the last two corners, where I could have gained a little bit more time. There's still plenty of time to be gained around this track on my part, probably a good couple of attempts or so. But yeah, the lap time I set was a 21.7. That's I think that's pretty good, and I think that'll be pretty high up there this week in a 23-degree track temperature. So I'm not sure what the track temps are going to be. Maybe they'll, if it's summer like it's supposed to be, the track temps will probably increase slightly. But yeah, hopefully it's a good base for you. Hopefully it helps you take plenty of time off your lap times as I go in the dirt there, and yeah, enjoy. So here we are, everybody, on the start finish line at Okayama, and we're going to head down into the first corner, which is quite a tricky first corner. You'll see a lot of people go off here, that's for sure, especially at the start of the race, because it is a little bit of a tricky one. Now, you're going to be all the way up in the gears at this point, and you're going to be all the way up into 6th, and you're going to be keeping an eye out for that blue cone on the right hand side, which is pretty much the end of the pit run, or the exit of the pit run. Now on the left hand side there isn't really any braking markers, so we're going to use the blue cone on our right hand side. Now just as you come up to that, or as it goes out of your peripheral vision, that's when you want to start braking, and we brake down into 4th, not getting tight to this apex from the get-go. Bit of a wide late apex, and then we're going to shift down into 3rd at this point, and we're going to take the apex, easing our way back onto the throttle, because if you get on the throttle too early here, then you're going to run out of track very quickly. The gravel on this left hand side does come up on you very quickly, so you're easing your way back on the throttle. 3rd gear. Once again, have a look at my throttle inputs as always in the flying lap, and then quickly we're going to be making our way back over to the right hand side. You'll be up into 4th at this point, and what we're keeping an eye out for is we want to get our car pointing towards this green strip in front of us. This is kind of dark green Astro strip, and just before we hit that strip, we're going to come off the throttle, a little bit of dab of the brakes, allowing the car to just roll in and then get back on the throttle, but easing back on the throttle from the get at the start, because it's a bit of a tricky corner, because when you've got full tank of fuel and your tyres aren't quite up to temperature, you really have to ease your way around this corner. You can't really get on full throttle until you've fully exited the corner. When you've got obviously less fuel in the car and you've got a lot of heat in those tyres, you can pretty much, as you get halfway around this apex, get your foot full on the throttle. Once again, have a look at my throttle inputs. I do have pretty much warm tyres and lower race fuel. I haven't got a full tank of fuel, so I'm able to get on the throttle a lot easier. So yeah, definitely this corner in particular, definitely worth practicing with a full tank of fuel, and just kind of as if you were starting the race. Because a lot of people try and go around near full throttle, especially at the start, and they'll just lose it. So as we come out of this, we want to be careful, because if we're on full throttle at the start, cold tyres, the car's just going to go from underneath you, because it's kind of like a little crest there. I don't know if you guys can kind of see that. The track kind of on the left hand side, there's ever so slightly a little crest, and there's the track kind of falls away over to the right hand side, so it just gets the car turning underneath you and unsettles the car. But yeah, ideally you're going to get through that, full throttle on the exit, make use of the curb, bring the car over to the left hand side, cover as little track as possible. Once again, cover as little track as possible, cover that curb, and then we come into quite a long hairpin, shall we say, or a long right-hander. Now, what we keep an eye out for is the 50 ball marker on our left-hand side, and we're not braking on it, we're going to brake just before it. You'll be all the way up in the gears here, into 6th. Now, depending on what setup you're using, whether if you're using the pure driving school setup or the Craig setup shop, they're the two that I flick between. The gear that you take this corner in can vary. So I'm using the Craig setup shop setup, as you know, so just suits my driving style better. And this is taken around, well, we shift down into 3rd gear. In the pure driving school setup, gear ratios are slightly different, so you may shift down into 2nd. So braking just before, trail braking, shifting down through the gears, getting the car pointed in, and what we're aiming for is kind of where just inside the curb the grass goes from, well, there is no grass, but the grass goes from green to brown. Because we're shifting down into 3rd or 2nd, depending on what setup you're using, and it's here at this point that's when you get back on the throttle. That's where you want to hit the apex, get back on the throttle. Don't keep it tight to this apex, allow the car to move over to the middle of the track, to move over, and then we're full on the throttle. Back straight, prime overtaking opportunity here, so getting that long hairpin, that long right-hander is important to get a good exit there. It's important to get that right, because it will set up a nice overtaking opportunity down here. Now, what we're doing on this one, it's coming down into a tight hairpin, a very tight and twisty section of the track. So what we're keeping an eye out for is this big tower on the left hand side, which is pretty much just before the 50 ball marker. Now, we want to be braking not on it, but just before. So probably what we would say is a 65 marker, if there was a 65 marker. And then we're going to be braking, keeping the car pointed in a straight line, braking down into 2nd. If you're in pure driving school setup, maybe 1st gear. If you feel more comfortable in 1st gear, take it in 1st gear. I'd advise against it, because getting back on the throttle control required in 1st gear is it's very minute. It's a very touchy car in 1st gear. So we're going to be rolling through. Be careful not to lock up the brakes. If you brake too late, you're going to lock up that right front and overshoot the corner. Get back on the throttle, easing your way back on the throttle, but get back on the throttle. Make sure you got the steering kind of straight again, because otherwise the car will rotate from underneath you. Now you will see in my flying lap that I do quickly shift up to third here. It's not required. I have found after doing a little bit of practice afterwards that even though you hit the rev limiter in second gear, it's probably easier to just stay in second gear and then lift off the throttle in this next very sharp left-hander. You don't lose any time. It's just easy. You don't have to worry. By shifting up to third, I've realised it's very quick going up to third and then coming back down to second again, and it's kind of too much to do in such a short period of time. So yeah, you can, even though I'm flying lap, I shift up to third. You do get the same result if you stay in second and hit that rev limiter. So we don't want to move all the way over to the right hand side here, because this left-hander comes up in you very quickly. We kind of want to hold where these tyre tracks are. So kind of middle of the track over to the right hand side. And as we're in second, we start to turn in, a little bit dab of the brakes, and then as we get over the corner, back onto the throttle. Car's going to move over to the right hand side. You can use all of this runoff. You won't get an off track here. Keeping you shift up into third. Get the car on the right hand side on this right curb to open up this another left hander. Two left handers in quick succession here, and then just before you reach the end of the curb, lift off the throttle. Slight little dab of the brakes again. Getting the car turning in over the curb as tight as you can without getting on the grass, and then back on the throttle. Once again, have a look at my throttle inputs through there, because it's a very slow but fiddly section, and throttle control is really important through there. So we then come up to first of two hairpins in the last sector. Two very tricky hairpins, which a lot of people in these cars, because it's very slow, it's so easy to just get too much power down quickly. I know I love to say it, but throttle control is so important around this last this track in particular, really. But these last two sectors in particular, throttle control is so important. Really is when you go when you have any slow sections in this car, because it's got quite a high amount of torque, and car likes to go from underneath you. So you'll be up in fourth gear at this point. And what we keep an eye out for is the 50 board marker on the right hand side, and that's when we're then going to start to brake, and we're going to shift down into second gear into the corner. We want to keep it tight around this apex. You don't want to drift wide, otherwise you'll lose time. Ease your way back on the throttle, allow the car to move over to the right. You'll get a bit of full throttle, but very quickly you're going to be lifting off, back on the brakes, trail braking around this apex, keeping it tight once again. You'll see in my flying lap, I actually lose probably a little bit of time because the car slides on me. So there was probably a good tenth that I could have made up here if I kept it a lot tighter. But I was trying to do exactly what I'm showing you guys here, keeping it tight. And as we come around the corner, when I get on the throttle, it's kind of as quick, easy, but as quick as we can. Allow the car to move over to the left. Once again, have a look at the throttle inputs. Full on the throttle. Now, this is a corner that you actually need to turn into a little bit earlier than you think, because if you turn a bit too late and try and snap the wheel, the car just spins. So as you pretty much see the curb on the right hand side come into view, you want to start turning in full throttle, keep your foot planted, trust the downforce. You can use this curb, but don't obviously go on the right hand side there where the pit entry is, because there's a bit of a drop there and it will throw the car off. Car's going to move over to the left hand side. Now, depending whether you're using Pure Driving School or Craig's, which is what I'm using, you may shift up into fifth gear if you get a lot of speed through there, and then quickly shift down into fourth. If you're in a pure driving school setup, you're going to stay within 4th gear. You'll probably hit the rev limiter, but you only hit the rev limiter just before your braking point. But what we're keeping an eye out for is this bit of dirt on the left-hand side. Now, just after the green strip is where you then want to either shift down into 4th or stay in 4th, depending on what setup you're using, as I just said. And start to turn in, trail braking. Don't turn in too early, because if you come in too shallow, you're not going to get the right exit and you're going to run out of track on the exit. So just before it gets light, as you can see here, that the track or the curb here is kind of blackened up, where obviously the rubber's been going on it, the tyres have been going on it, and it's kind of the end of this blackened red and white curb is where you want to hit the apex, and that's where you then want to get on the throttle, full on the throttle, allowing the car to drift over to the left hand side. You can use all of this runoff. You can even risk getting 2 wheels on the gravel. Of course, it's not ideal, it's not the quickest solution, but you won't get an off track, you won't get a slowdown. iRacing's quite generous with this off track, considering their form on other runoff areas, on other tracks. So yeah, make the most of this as you can. Full on the throttle, all the way down and across the finish line. And that is a drive-through around Okayama racetrack. The first racetrack that I ever raced on in the Mazdas. And yeah, it's quite an interesting track, but I hope that helped you guys. Yeah, have a look at the flying lap, which we're about to go into. Take care of my throttle inputs and where I'm turning in, where I'm hitting the apexes. A couple of tricky corners around here, and yeah, nice easy throttle is required in a lot of areas. So yeah, hope that helps you guys. Let's head into the flying lap.